Welcome to another episode of the Schlegel Design Remodel podcast. I'm your host, Amy Gerard, and today we have Doug Howard with us. Doug is an experienced leader, an entrepreneur, and business consultant with over 25 years of success in leading organizations, starting new companies, and assisting client businesses as they start up, grow, or transition. Doug joined Remodelers Advantage as Director of Consulting Services in 2017. He now specializes in helping remodeling company owners develop strategic plans, streamline processes, improve profitability, and navigate growth. That is a lot of information. Doug, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, no, short of my mom, I'm not sure anybody could do a better introduction. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks. That's what I started reading. I'm like, oh man, did I sign up for all these words? So like I said, thanks for joining. I know you have a lot of experience helping remodelers and growing their businesses, but that also means you have a ton of information about the remodeling industry, which is also interesting for those of us homeowners who might be looking to remodel or just curious to know what the industry is doing today.
Sure. Yeah, no, glad to be here.
So let's start with, what is Remodelers Advantage and what do you do there?
No, it's a great question. So Remodelers Advantage has been around for about 25 plus years. And the main thing the company does is it creates peer groups of remodeling companies. They meet in groups of 10. They're all from different parts of the country within a group, so they don't compete with each other. They share financials, they share organizational charts, talk about things going on in the industry, and they really kind of work as each other's board of directors to set commitments twice a year and see how they can grow and improve their operation. I joined the company in 2017. My background had been accounting and consulting, had my own company for about 17 years, and then found Remodelers Advantage. So my role in the company is to really do and develop the department that does one-on-one consulting, a lot of coaching with clients. So on any given day, I probably talk to 5 or 6 remodeling companies that we do over Zoom calls or phone calls. And then to do some on-site work. So we do like on-site strategic planning and process improvement, usually like a 2-day visit. Then I do get to do some facilitation of the roundtables groups as well, which is really great because I think a lot of times in consulting, you have a certain body of knowledge and then you do more teaching than learning. But with roundtables, we are continually getting updated on everything that's, like with COVID, it would have been hard to be conversant on that based on prior history. It was what was going on in the here and now, that was really a very helpful piece to, being able to help folks navigate it. So yeah.
Obviously not a lot to draw from when a pandemic hits.
Yeah. When people use the word unprecedented in every other sentence, prior history doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot.
No, every ad for a year was in these unprecedented times. Yes. So how many remodelers does Remodelers Advantage work with across the United States?
No, it's a great question. So we have about 250 that are in our peer groups. It hovers between 250 and 300. We have about another couple hundred that are on our university, and then probably 50 or so at any given time that I work with that are under the umbrella of RA, but they're not necessarily roundtables members or may or may not be in the university. So yeah, so probably like 500-600 companies at any given time.
It's a lot to think there's that many remodelers.
Yeah, the funny thing is there's like really tens of thousands out there.
Yeah, right. That's probably just a smidge of what's actually represented. Yeah. And we have been part of Remodelers Advantage, and I actually just was exchanging emails with some of the marketing members from our group. So it's a great opportunity to share information and not ever feel like you're sharing something that they're going to steal or compete, because we don't steal customers from their market.
Right. Yeah, it's funny, when I first learned about it and reflected back on my 17 or so years in business, I really wish I had something like that in my industry, because when you're an accountant, you don't even have an outside accountant, you do that yourself, right? So I really never had anybody that could give me advice on my business that truly had any real understanding of what I was going through, because, when you're going through tough times, you generally don't put out ads that say that, right?
Right. You don't want other people to know what you're doing that's working if it's tough times either. Like, we're doing fine, but I'm not going to tell you our secret.
Yeah. Plus, it's hard to advise businesses when they think you're struggling, right? So, when I think back to, boy, if someone had known sort of what our organizational chart was and what our profitability was, where we were underbilling for things, all those kinds of things. It's amazing what an impact it could have made. And so I love seeing that now in this industry. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely a great organization that really helps remodelers and in the end, consumers.
Right, exactly, sure.
Okay, so going right into remodeling landscape. Can you go over what it looks like in 2021?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I tell people all the time, if I had predicted in the spring of 2020 what 2021 looked like, I probably would have been run out of town on a rail as being just stupid, And so
we all would have.
Right. And so it's like, we went from no one's ever going to let us in their house again. We're all going to be building decks and doing siding because we're going to be outside, right? To the most, I almost said unprecedented, but the most phenomenal rise in business activity, demand for services. I think some of it was economics. I think some of it was people spending a lot of time at home realizing that any house, I think at some point during COVID seemed too small or poorly laid out. Or, I had one gentleman call me one time and said, I loved my open concept until I had to work from home. Right.
Oh yeah. That is a trend that we were covering going into end of 2020, going into 2021 is the open concept might be on its way out.
Right. Yeah. I had one person that said, I wish I could find a way to market an open concept that included privacy. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's
cubicles.
Right. Yeah. Or just putting the kids outside, I guess. I don't know. But
yeah, we tried that.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, so we had this surge in activity. I think it caught some folks by surprise. But then at the same time, we had the offsetting effect of the labor market becoming much, much more challenging and disruption in product flow. So, here you had people that were saying, I would just love to have business last spring or spring of 2020, saying, I've got more business than I've ever written before in many cases, but now I'm struggling to find people to do the work. And, oh yeah, I'm waiting X amount of weeks for cabinets, or, I've got tile on a slow boat coming over from Europe or whatever. So I think what it did is it very quickly shifted the challenge, right? For most part, people had a sense of kind of what their capacity was. And the challenge was, can we sell enough? Can we sell it at the right price? Those kinds of things. All of a sudden, it flipped upside down. And we went from using some of our sales tools, to tools we used to help people predict their sales levels, to flipping those around to predict capacity, because it was no longer, can I sell it? It's how do I get that much through design? Or what about the start dates? Or so I think as folks have adjusted or started to adjust, I think that issue of capacity is going to continue into 22. Between some of the government programs and just the surge in activity, a lot of folks had cash flow problems that went away or paid off some things that they had been struggling with in terms of debt. But now we got to get these organizations so that when the tide comes back down a little bit, we're still in good shape. And I think that'll be the big challenge for 2022.
Yeah, totally. There's so much there, how vastly it changed in a short amount of time. But I think, yeah, what you described is definitely how Schlegel has felt in this last year. So are there any trends that you're seeing in remodeling? And I say that in terms of, again, looking at a homeowner, and we definitely have seen a few newer trends. Are there anything that you guys have seen trend-wise in remodeling?
It's funny. I think some of the things that we've seen with some of our clients is, I think there's a lot more attention to sort of marrying up indoor and outdoor space. I think, just the nature of how things are being built now, people have, I think, a bigger interest in what's going on, not just in the house, but in and around the house. So I think there's that. I think there's a certain amount of, flexibility people are looking for, just in terms of, I'm not sure what the next iteration of craziness looks like, but, we'd like to be able to have the house adjust when it does. And so I think there's some of that. I think technology is a big piece. I think one of the things, we often laugh about how we struggle to do some things remotely with some of the members on Zoom up until COVID. We had between our spring and fall meetings, we try to have a gathering. And I remember trying to stay on Zoom for an hour, and we couldn't get people on, and we couldn't hear what they were doing. And now things like, unmute yourself as part of the common English language, right? And so, but because of that, I do think people have embraced some technologies that are helping the industry. Like, for instance, the way some people are doing measures. Sometimes the initial consultation that was a 25-minute drive across town and back can now be accomplished. And not everything, should be done on two-dimensional Zoom, but I do think there are some changes. I also think there's a benefit in that. I think people really saw that their processes and the way they did things were very important. They kind of spent some time looking at that. And I think that bodes very well for the homeowner. As people are looking at remodeling projects, I think one of the most important things is, what is it that the company that you're talking about is really good at? What do they spend a lot of their time doing? Do they have a well-developed process? Because I always tell people, like, remodeling projects can go really, really easily, but a lot of times there are challenges, right? It's a challenging thing. And most folks don't do a lot of remodeling projects in their lifetime, right? They may do one or two big remodels in their whole lifetime. So it's not something that, as from a customer standpoint, it's an easy purchase to make, right? So you're trying to figure out, who's good, and you hear the horror stories. But I always tell people, if I was going to climb Mount Everest, and if you knew me, you would know that that's not a possibility. But if I was, I would want to go with someone that has already climbed Mount Everest, that has done it successfully, and that knows what some of the possibilities could be. So when the storms hit, we have the right stuff with us and that type of thing. To me, that is the most critical part of how remodeling companies can distinguish themselves and what the consumer really can be looking for. It's like, think about where you're headed with this project. Have they been there before? Are they preparing you the right way? To me, that's a really big deal. And I think that got better during this period of time.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, and to your point of technology, people are doing more research and figuring all that out because they have access to all that. So, and then it's us keeping up with them too. And we just sat in a meeting yesterday about, we're trying to get away from paper and making that easier for the client instead of, okay, turn this paper back in, but just sign here on a device. So that definitely gave us a push to move into that direction.
Yeah.
We've already started talking a little bit about this, but the impact of what you all just discussed on homeowners wanting to remodel their home is now, with the craziness, a good time to remodel. What would you do?
Yeah, it's so hard to predict certain things, right? I mean, certainly some costs have gone up, and I think there was a spike in some areas, and some of that came back in most markets in line. But, I think choosing the right remodeling company is very, very important. But I also think moving the project forward, determining if that's something you want to do, between product delays and the surge in business activity, when I talk to folks, and, if they're talking about doing a project, it's like you want to be on the calendar, right? You want to be moving the ball forward. I think it's great when remodeling companies can do a great job setting customer expectations. Hey, I always like to talk about the characteristics of a good project, right? If we're talking about that with the customer up front, it's going to depend on how clear we are and, what you're trying to accomplish, how quickly, not to be rushed, but that you can, make selections and things that are going to really make a difference. You have a lot of impact on how smoothly the customer being, how that goes. So I think there's that, but I also think the idea, it's like, I think it was back in August where normally, people might be saying, well, I want this project done by Thanksgiving, right? And I had some folks sort of jokingly say, absolutely, we will get this done by Thanksgiving. Just tell us which year.
Right. So I was like, where are you going with that? Because that wasn't in our world. We were, I think it was February or March. We were like, should we put the message out if they want their remodeling project done by February, they have to sign now?
Right. No, it is. And again, it's just a big challenge. And so, there's lots of different things go into that, right? COVID disrupted a lot of smaller local governments. So even things like just getting permits, right? Slowed us down. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but
it's a big deal.
Right? And so all these little pieces say, as soon as you want to do something and we get it on the calendar, we start working through the process and consumer really gets educated on what's going to help this move forward or slow it down. I think those are the things so it's a long way around. I guess what I'm saying is I would want to be moving forward with projects. Now, in that, I hope my wife's not listening to this, because she is the consummate, like, why don't we do this? And I try to keep her away from my remodeling clients, but it doesn't always work that way.
I work for a remodeler. I empathize for my husband.
So,
and I do marketing. So all I do is look at the beautiful end products. I compare the beginning and the end, and I don't have to live through it. So it seems very easy for me.
Well, we literally installed light fixtures this morning. And I told the electrician this was going to happen. I sent my wife's at work. I sent her a picture, and I got back the text that I could have predicted without any trouble at all. Now we need a new dining room table.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm jumping a little bit around, but you talked about the process and why that's important. But what should homeowners be looking for when they go to find that remodeler? What questions should they have that they need answered when they're looking for the remodeler? And what's the best way to even start your search? It can be a little overwhelming.
It can, so it's like anything else, right? I always like when people reach out to people they know. We see a lot of really good conversations coming out of some of the most social media neighborhood groups and things like that, because people tend to tell, good stories. I think places like some of the online searches, Google reviews and things like that are a good place to get a sense of what's going on with somebody. The website tells a piece of the story. I think it's got to be a good relationship. So I think the sooner you kind of look at that company and say, well, what are their values? And not just like the 8 or 10 things that get listed on the website, but things that you can tell just by looking at what they're doing, what their involvement is in the community, how long they've been around, they have a physical location, all those things lend themselves to, this is a company that's stable, that's done this before. For certain types of projects, I think it's really helpful if you can see those kinds of projects having been done. You don't want to be anybody's experimental.
You don't want to be the guinea pig.
You don't. And so, one of the things that we see more and more of the remodeling companies doing is finding those niches, whether it's waterfront property or, just a whole host of different things. So I think that can be helpful. I think it's always helpful to talk to folks that have worked with that company. But we had a company about 4 or 5 months ago. They do a party, a gathering right at the end of a project, which has been harder to do with COVID, but they started doing it again. And so they're at this house that's been remodeled, and we have the before pictures up, and they have some nice food and things like that. But the homeowner was there, and the next project that they were about to start, that couple was there. And for folks that were meeting with them, it's like, for whatever horror stories you've heard about remodeling or relationships with contractors or whatever, there's a happy homeowner. We're in their home. There's our next homeowner. They're excited. It's like, see, I look for those things that just say, is this someone I want to, kind of hang out with? Because let's face it, we're going to hang out with them, right? They're going to be in our house for a while. You're
going to be friends whether you want to or not.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And, they're going to be around your stuff and your kids and your pets. And, it's just, I think having that really good feel is important. And it's not as hard to find as people think. And price is always important, but most things in life, we don't look for the cheapest version of. We look within a range, right? And one of the biggest challenges I think remodeling companies have, but also consumers have, is figuring out what those intangibles are that are going to make this a good experience when I don't do this all the time, right? But really figuring out what's different, what's special about Schlegel, what's special about, XYZ company, and does that justify that I'm working with this company, that, I'm going to make the investment that I'm going to participate at the level I should do, keep up with things like selections and all that. All goes into, you're probably not going to make an investment this big all the time. And it's something that's going to have an impact on the way you live in your house for a long time. So those are the things I think really, it's research, but it's not just Googling stuff and getting quotes. That is not the research people need to be doing. It's a piece of it, but it's really just the first wave of it, I think.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think getting to know who you're working with, in our case, a designer and a lead carpenter, and really feeling comfortable with them and feeling comfortable with that process you referred to, that's crucial, because to your point, things could go sideways and you want to have a company that can manage it. And you also want to have someone there that you trust will manage it. So right. That's good advice. How about red flags? Any big red flags? You've worked with a lot of remodelers. I mean, you've probably even seen, I mean, I hate to say that, but some that maybe had some work to do on how they handle things. So as a consumer, red flags.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think, one is if they don't really have that clearly defined process, because again, some of it is the benefit of a clearly defined process is we know when we're getting off track, right? If we know how long things are supposed to take or what the right sequence is, that's super important. So I think that's one. When you ask for people's references, or you look at reviews and things like that, to me, if they're very obscure as to who the reference is, or we've got two names and one of them's the same last name as the owner, that's but I mean, when you
just have one of those every once in a blue moon, right. That's the one of two reviews. Maybe that's not the best one.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's that, but it's also, I think a good remodeling company not only tells you what they're going to do, but starts to demonstrate it from the very first meeting. Right. And so companies that come in and ask questions, that take notes while you're answering those questions, that refer back to why you're doing the project in their proposal. To me, those are all things that say, you didn't just tell me you're going to listen and communicate well. You've already shown me you're going to listen and communicate well. So I think really in that first meeting or two, there's lots of little clues as to whether or not this person is telling you what the experience is likely to be, or showing you. And when you get a sense of, I hear what you're saying, but you've asked me that question 3 times, or no, we're doing this because the kids are moving out, not moving in, or the grandkids are moving in. And those to me are like, if we're not on the same page already, it doesn't get easier through the process.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, you say you're listening, but are you showing me you're listening?
Right.
That's excellent. I often think of red flags as, chucking a truck or unlicensed, but that's even once you're further in the process, that's a great red flag. So yeah, kind of fielding it all the way through to make sure you're comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And just not ignoring, it's hard because sometimes you get really excited about these projects. And just, it's like the hiring process for businesses, right? You get really excited about something and you kind of, you gloss over things that later on you think, that probably should have.
That was a red flag and I ignored it.
Yeah. And so, I just think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah. Your gut really does. It's pretty good. It tells you a lot more than you give it credit for.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So you talked about the industry today. Where do you think the industry's headed? You mentioned a little bit in 2022 that we might be in the same boat. Do you have any crystal ball of where you think it's headed? I
do. I have all the answers for the next 10 years. I just can't.
Doug, you should be making millions. You have all the answers.
Wouldn't that make me the hottest commodity?
You would be on every podcast and talk show ever made.
I would. Yeah. I'd finally get that sitcom I've been looking for. But yeah, no, I think really 2022, I think 2023, we're going to see strong demand. I think we're going to see the product availability starting to slowly improve. I think the byproducts of some of these process improvements will kick in. And I'm really hopeful we're going to see more of the job market kind of get back. People need to go back to work.
Across the board, please, right. Everyone, let's work.
So I think that will all help. I think 22 and 23 people need to be really focused on, strengthening companies, getting that structure that they know they're going to need, training and development, getting the right people in place. Because I think once we get out to 2024, we're probably going to see, and again, it could be a little bit later, maybe see things level off a little bit. We may see some consolidation in the industry, but I don't foresee it being like we're going to fall off a cliff. I think it's going to be just more, maybe the surge becomes a little bit more level,
a little more manageable from the business side. And that again helps the consumer. You don't have to book out a year in advance. And
that's exactly right. So I think, and I think some companies are slowly starting to see what their new level, their new pace is. So, at first you have that surge, you don't go out and just fill up more staff. But then when you start to level off at a higher number, it's easier to say, all right, we're going to build some of that capacity in. Those wait times will start to shrink. I also think we're going to see more people, doing more specializing. I think it's very hard with the flow of work and the capacity of work for some companies, not all companies, but to do as many different things. And I think we may see that there are going to be some folks out there that are going to really find their niche, which for the right consumer could be really, really helpful, you know?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, for us, we do additions, kitchens, bathrooms, the whole kind of gamut. So you say maybe those smaller companies no longer offer the full gamut. They're like, we're really specializing in additions or whole house remodels or just bathrooms.
Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, I've got a client, the very first client I worked with, he specializes in waterfront property here in Maryland. And there's a certain set of rules. There's a certain set of things that you want to do with viewscapes and windows and, that whole thing. And really has started to, and the funny thing is his one of his biggest marketing activities is he exhibits at the Annapolis Boat Show every year. We have the second largest boat show in America.
Makes so much sense.
Right? At first we thought it was a little bit of a crazy idea, but and not everybody at the boat show is his customer, but everybody that's his customer is at the boat show, right? If you've got money waterfront property, and the second largest boat show in America is in your backyard, you would, you go to the boat show. So, again, and the number of jobs that most companies need, it's less about market share as much as it is identifying a source for a number of customers and then really, catering to that source.
Yeah.
So, I think that we'll see, and then there's still companies out there, you guys are one of them, that do a broad range of things and, have lots of capability. And that can be really good too, because I may be doing a whole home addition and I may have a kid that just bought a house that is really more concerned about just getting their 2 bathrooms done. So, it's nice when that relationship can stay comprehensive as well.
Yeah, exactly. Fulfill many needs, but you can see that there's demand for both.
The biggest thing is I think companies just need to be clear on what it is they want to be, because that's the hardest thing for the consumer. It's like, if you, the business owner, can't tell me who you are, it's really hard for me to distinguish myself, why you're different, why I should be working with you and who you are. And so the clearer you get on that message, whether it's, a broad range of things, a specialization, a certain way of doing things, the clearer that is to the customer, the more likely the right consumer finds the right remodeling company, I think.
I think you're right. When you go to a website and you can't quite pinpoint what they're doing, you don't usually buy.
Yeah.
Well, Doug, this was great. It was really fun to learn more on the industry perspective. Then, I cover a lot of stuff. We cover everything from like a countertop to a faucet to tile. So this was really fun to look at it from more of the industry perspective and kind of what we're seeing in remodeling as a whole. So I appreciate you taking the time to visit and share your huge breadth of knowledge with us.
Well, we'll talk again sometime. I'll tell you more about all the things that I know that I can't share with everybody yet.
That would be great. And I'm also thinking we're going to need to touch base when your predictions come true, so we can make sure that you are accurate there.
That's exactly right. Yeah. The fact check. I like that.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.